Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. Dan Lust in the captain's seat. And we have a quad box this week, gentlemen. A packed house. Mike Kravchenko, Mike Lawson, Taryn Sharma. Gentlemen, all at once. Let's give a collective boom. Let's
Boom!
boom. Oh, you knew I was going to do it. Okay, copyright law prevents us from actually playing the song because we would have done it. But we have a packed house. We actually have a lot of topics. But listen, I think there was a lot of speculation as to whether or not I was going to appear on the podcast this week. If I just had gone, my head had just taken me to the heavens from all of my New York Post fame. But I'm here. I'm here once a week. We promise we will always be back. But I'm happy to get Mike Lawson and Taryn back. The original NIL Hour crew, guys. It's been a while since I think I've had both of you on a podcast, like a long time.
Yeah, Mike moved into a new house since the last time we were all together.
It's been a busy couple of months.
Well, Mike K and I have been holding it down. I know, Taryn, you were here last week, and don't worry, I have some updates on Ken Turkel. I don't know when I'm supposed to give you the Ken Turkel update, but we have a lot to cover. Let's do the rundown, and then we will go across the board about some stuff we need to cover, some housekeeping issues. So number one, let's talk about the biggest story in sports, and it's still kind of buzzing, and even today, we recorded this on Thursday night, but that's the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. There's already been 2 lawsuits filed. As I have predicted, there will be more. As Andrew Brandt says, there will be lawyers. We will talk about all angles of that. That'll be our main story. We're going to talk about the Warner Brothers and TNT settlement. We spent a lot of time talking about that. I think that was Dan Wallach's last podcast with us. Maybe Mike K. When was that? Like 3 months ago? 4 months ago?
That's probably around there, yeah. I'd say 3 months ago.
We're due for a Dan Wallach appearance, but Dan, I tried to get him on, could not join tonight, but we will cover that. And then we're going to go to the hardwood. There is, Mike, how do we want to phrase this? There's some retaliation being investigated with respect to Rick Brunson. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. That's, I think, the way that they're seeing it, as retaliation and harassment.
Okay, we're going to talk about the New York Knicks. And then last but not least, we have the NIL Hour, Taryn and Mike. Whenever you guys want to come back for a weekly show, you guys are more than welcome to. But for the time being, we got 3 topics. We got the college basketball point shaving scandal revisited. Taryn, we may have known about this last week. We might not have known about it, but something was brewing and the news is out. If you were wondering what we were alluding to last week, this is it. It's here. And then we have a very big NIL story in terms of the transfer portal. We'll talk about Underwood's transfer to Michigan. What's Underwood's first name, Taryn?
Bryce Underwood.
Bryce.
Not transferring. He's a high school class of 2025. He'll be committing.
Flipping the commitment, I should say. Flipping the commitment. That's fair. And then an update in the collective world with UCF doing something that no one has done before. Guys, how's that for a teaser? Would you? Let's say you were just a listener of this episode. Would you be into this? Would you be into that? Is that something you'd be interested in?
I would stay until the very end.
I think so too. Especially because last week we had all of our listeners stay to the end, Taryn, for what I called the bet of the year. Okay? I said, can't lose. I investigated it. I told everybody, Jake Paul is going to win this fight. There's a lot of methods to him winning, one of which I had thought about was the rigged angle. Taryn, I think we talked about it on the podcast that this fight could very well be rigged. And if it's rigged, it's not going to be rigged for Tyson. It's going to be rigged for Jake Paul. Listen, I'll pat myself on the back as much as I need to. I had a feeling this was going to happen because I've watched a lot of Jake Paul fights. And guys, last time Mike Tyson was in a boxing ring, it was an exhibition match. It wasn't a real match. So it shouldn't shock anybody. But then again, we had an entire arena at Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Jerry World filled with thousands of people. We had 110 million people, according to Netflix, watching this worldwide. More people on top of that watching on pay-per-view. And then we had, according to the Post, and again, anybody wants to read the article, you can find it online. But 4 times the amount of people bet on this boxing fight than had bet on any boxing fight in history, according to the Post article. So here we are. Okay, everyone's watched the fight. Everyone's heard about the fight. This was a fight that was allegedly sanctioned by the Texas, I think it's the licensing department. I don't have the exact name in front of me. But this was a fight that was truly supposed to be sanctioned. 2-minute rounds, heavier boxing gloves. They had the 3 knockdown rule. There's been some reports, which I don't think are true, that Michael Irving saw a copy of the contract and Mike Tyson wasn't allowed to throw certain punches. I don't buy that. But I do feel, and this is my personal opinion, that this did not have the optics of a normal boxing match. Obviously, Mike Tyson was in the hospital 4 months before. Somehow he got cleared. Somehow, as a 58-year-old man with really, I don't know, I'm not really sure how he was cleared. And then he showed the cardio of a 58-year-old man. So I just have a lot of questions. I will open up the floor. I think people know where I stand on the topic. Mike L, Mike K, Karen, does anybody have thoughts on the theory I have put forward that there might be a class action lawsuit here? Because I have some more thoughts, but I want to see what you guys think.
Yeah, well, just jumping back, I thought that our discussion last week was nice. It was win-win because you said that Jake Paul would win. That obviously happened. And I said that it was probably fixed, which it seems likely that it would happen. But yeah, I think that it's going to be difficult to prove, obviously. Probably not something that's going to go forward. But I think a very legitimate argument can be made that it was. Mike, what do you think, Mike L?
That the fight was legitimate?
No, that the argument that it was fixed is legitimate.
Oh, I got you.
The
Well,
argument.
here's the problem.
The argument that the fight was fixed is obviously legitimate. Okay, so we're not questioning that. I'm obviously right about that.
This is the problem with these celebrity exhibition boxing matches. There's always these contract clauses about what's supposed to happen during the fight. The reason for this fight that people thought it wouldn't be like that is because it was sanctioned and it would actually go on their record and all that stuff. As you could tell from Mike Tyson's interviews, he has lost all sort of sensibilities about any sort of pride. I mean, he's kind of like, my record is what it is. Like, we're all going to be dead soon anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Hold on. You got to stop there for a second. Who did he tell that to, Mike? That's the best part of that story. He told it to like an 8-year-old girl. Mike wasn't all there. He was not. He was telling an 8-year-old girl, "I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be dead soon. It doesn't matter." Forget.
Okay, it's about legacy. Legacy doesn't matter.
Legacy doesn't matter. So
she was a pro.
She was a pro.
I think. I think when you look at like all the fights that Jake Paul has had too, I think it's just these exhibition and actually I've been watching a lot of interviews recently about Canelo because Jake Paul keeps calling out Canelo and Canelo's like not really interested in fighting him now, but when I retire, those types of exhibitions might be beneficial for me because you don't have this kind of risk of injury going into it because there's this like it eludes this fact that like you're not going in there to knock the lights out of the opponent. So when you see something like that, I think everybody was having the expectation because it's Mike Tyson. It didn't matter. He was gonna go in and just unload on Jake Paul. I thought that the surest bet was that it was going to go the distance. I thought that was a guarantee. I think it was like plus 130 because I just knew that there was going to be some sort of clause that there was to not injure or whatnot. Who knows? I mean, the first 2 rounds, Mike Tyson did come out swinging pretty good. And then Jake clocked him once in like the 3rd round that made him kind of stumble.
You're analyzing this like it's a real fight, Mike. Let's call a spade a spade. Whether we want to say it's rigged or it was Tyson blowing out on cardio after round 2, it's not really, it's beside the point. I think in the main reason, and I'll kind of get to the legal side of this, but after 8 rounds of the fight, everybody, right? No matter if you think it's a real fight and whatever, Tyson just ran out of gas. By the end of the 8th round, there was like 10 seconds left and they just started bowing towards each other. This was not what we would view as a typical boxing match. So there's a lot of angles we can talk about, right? But what I want to talk about is
that's because Jake Paul's not a typical boxer. Of course he's going to do that type of stuff.
But I'm not convinced. If we're really getting specific, I don't really know how a 58-year-old who clearly blew out on his cardio, right? How someone like that can be properly sanctioned for a fight. And then even so, right? Like they were talking about, even Jake post-fight was saying he wasn't trying to hurt him. I'm not really as concerned with like. I'm concerned with the optics that what we really had, and to the point that you just said, Mike, which is a good one. What we really had was an exhibition, a public sparring fight. Whether I don't actually believe it was in writing. I don't think they would be that stupid. But I think there may have been an agreement, to go easy on one another. Which whatever. I don't I don't have an issue with it, right? Like I don't have an issue with the concept of an exhibition, but I wouldn't have stayed up late to watch the fight. The bar that I was at in Vegas when we were watching it probably wouldn't. I mean, they probably would have purchased it because they would have. But there were people that bought pay-per-views that flew out to the fight. Obviously, all the celebrities that were there, and again, the 110 million people that watched the fight. If you had to ask, if you guys, while we're all here, the four pretty smart guys, actually three, and then myself. So like, I'm not the smartest, but I would think of the 110 million people that watched this fight, according to Netflix, if you said that this was an exhibition and it was just for fun and there was nothing really attached to it because Mike couldn't pass a physical and, Mike's 58 years old and they've agreed that they're not going to, knock each other out. That 110 million number that Netflix saw, which is a great number for boxing, right? A lot of people are watching sport, a lot of people watching Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. That number is much less, right? The take home for Jake Paul and Mike Tyson is a lot less. So there's a lot more extra millions of dollars that they made and a lot extra millions of people that watched the fight because it was properly sanctioned. So what I'm saying is, and again, you don't have to prove your case on day one, right? I think there's millions of dollars in potential damages. And I think the alleged conspiracy between the promotion and the Texas licensing department and Dallas Cowboy Stadium, like I think there's enough there that some attorney will look at it and maybe have, and maybe I know about a couple of attorneys that are doing this, that are really having a real conversation about the calculus of filing this lawsuit. I don't know if anyone's going to do it, but I was definitely correct in the prediction that people are weighing their options right now, and there potentially is something worth digging into.
And what would you classify as the class for that class action? Would it be the individuals who paid to go to the arena? Because most people have Netflix, right? Like I didn't pay for it. I had Netflix. So of course I just threw it on there. It's not like it was ESPN. I had to buy it, right? Unless you can prove that you bought Netflix specifically just to watch that fight. I don't know. But then you have the bettors. But I think the bettors are very difficult, and Dan Wallach has been breaking that down on the perspective of a class action suit for bettors. I think it's ripe for that, but there's also this eerie kind of not great precedent against filing lawsuits against, for types of fixed matches if you can prove it.
Yeah, I'm and again, I mentioned it in the Post article, but the precedent for fans suing, right? And we can go back to the sign stealing lawsuit against that the Jets season ticket holder filed against Bill Belichick and the Patriots once upon a time for sign stealing. He said, my season tickets are not worth as much on the secondary market because the Jets keep losing to the sign stealing, cheating Patriots. That case gets thrown out of court. Bettors that had bet on baseball during the Major League Baseball sign stealing saga of the Astros and the Yankees and the Red Sox, bettors sued those teams. They sued DraftKings, FanDuel, Major League Baseball. Those cases got kicked out of court. And then, I guess the precedent for the bettors was that they didn't have standing, they didn't have privity against the leagues they were suing. And then for the season ticket holder, the essentially core of the argument was that you're guaranteed a seat at the arena or at the stadium. And as long as the game is played, you're not guaranteed a fair game. You're just guaranteed a seat at the game. Now, Mike, the difference being, and there's a couple things that make this somewhat unique, right? Like the Jets will be playing games on their schedule, regardless if the games are fair and unfair. There's 17 games a year, or whatever there was at the time of maybe 16 back then. But this fight doesn't happen unless, everybody gets to the sanctioning board. So I think that's number one. Paul is also the promoter and the fighter, which makes it also somewhat unique. And there is real privity with the fans that buy a ticket to an event because they think it's a sanctioned fight. That's a little different. So it's the people that bought tickets to the event to go, right? And my firm, once upon a time, not my current firm, my last firm had done the Fire Festival class action cases. And it's difficult to get a class certified when you have all these different damages, right? So Fire Festival was a little tricky because you had, everyone bought a ticket to Fire Festival, but everyone's individual expenses in terms of going on planes and ground transportation, those are all different. So I think the bettors are a little trickier, but I think the people that bought the pay-per-view, number one, and the people that bought tickets to the event that might not have gone if it was an exhibition, I think those are the people that are thinking about it. And, I've in the couple of days since this article came out, actually, let me poll you guys. Over under 20 and a half calls to my work line since this article became public.
Slam the over.
Slam the over. Over under 5 crazy people that were included in the over 20. Yeah, way
Over.
way
For sure.
Some legit,
Over.
some legit people, some crazy people. Not mentioning names. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're one of the people that called, you're not the crazy people. You know who you are, crazy people. Okay. But anyway,
But Dan, and
yeah.
I'm just, again, I think you're right. I'm just truly playing devil's advocate about how you can show the cognizable damage. No matter what, Jake sells tickets. Hate him, love him. He prides himself on being so hated that people want to see him get knocked out. He's always been that way. That's why people get in the seats. I think it's very difficult for an individual who bought a ticket to go there and said that they specifically bought it only because it was an exhibition is very difficult to show. I mean, he sells out all of his fights. So it's that I feel like that number, that damage, like doesn't feel like it's easy to put into some sort of cognizable damage.
I never would have, told anybody to place a bet on this fight if it was an exhibition. I never would have done that. And I imagine that handle is different. It's not 4 times any boxing event, but that's neither here nor there. I do want to talk about, and I did mention 2 lawsuits have been filed. So what we're talking about is maybe additional lawsuits on top. In the immediate aftermath of this lawsuit, which we have not, I guess in the immediate aftermath of the fight, which we didn't talk about, a lot of streaming issues at Netflix, and you had 2 lawsuits, one filed in Florida, one filed in California, relating to the quality of the stream, suits against Netflix. And the argument being essentially that you buy Netflix, or you have Netflix for these issues, and if you have streaming issues, again, maybe Mike, to the point you said earlier, you already own the product, right? So it's not like it cost you any more money to watch Netflix that particular night. But I think the argument seems to be that they would have found an alternative way to watch it, and it interrupted their general viewing experience. But again, 2 lawsuits out of this, and I do expect more. But I'll open it up. Taryn, you look ready to chime in. I feel like that's a face that's ready to chime in.
Yeah, well, I think that this is a really big moment for Netflix. They've been delving into these live sports broadcasts. They did it with tennis. They've done it with this. But the real big prize that they've received is the Christmas Day NFL broadcast. And so CBS is going to be producing these, but they're going to be available live on Netflix. This is a big moment for Netflix, who has shown a desire to kind of delve into this area in the same way that Apple TV has with soccer and with the Friday night baseball games. So if the NFL sees that Netflix is not capable of producing a product or a venue by which people can actually watch the games, I think that has to be a major concern for Netflix, because 108 million viewers, I mean, you're going to get a significant number again for NFL on Christmas Day. And so I think that would be a major concern for Netflix, for the NFL, and who is publicly at least saying that they have confidence in Netflix right now, but also for the viewers. If you're not going to be able to watch those games, that would be very frustrating.
What kind of cuts against this lawsuit, though, is the lawsuit we just talked about, that it wasn't worth it to watch the fight anyways. So what's the damage if you couldn't watch the fight when the fight wasn't worth the viewership? So it kind of goes, each lawsuit's got separate angles.
Yeah, and if the first one was decided or settled before the second one, then maybe you have that effect, right? But you're unlikely to have to deal with that fact within the actual streaming disruption lawsuit, right?
I recall there being issues. Obviously, we're in the streaming sports era. I recall issues with like Amazon. I can't put my finger on it, but at least as far as I recall, I've never seen another like class action lawsuit relating to a streaming sports event. So I do think, again, and not to belabor the point, but at the end of 8 rounds, everyone I was with, and I was at a bar at Resorts World in Vegas, everyone said, like, why did we watch that fight? I would like the last half an hour of my life back. And that was the sentiment. It was like the fix was obviously in. Mike didn't try, and this was a complete waste of time. And then everybody said, well, Jake Paul made $40 million and Tyson made $20 million, so the fix was in, and we just got had. And I think that's why we've already seen 2 lawsuits. And again, conduct detrimental resorts, world and casino. I would say lawsuit to be filed is plus 175. I could definitely see it, and I this is not inside information, but I have lawyers that I've spoken to who are contemplating doing it now. There's no such thing as attorney to attorney privilege. This is I'm not co-counseling on any of these things. I don't want to be involved in this because I don't want the smoke from Mike. But I'm just, I hear things and think this would make sense for someone to challenge. And Mike K, Mike L, and Taryn, even the fact that we've had this kind of a conversation, and obviously things are blowing up on TikTok and Twitter, all these different, Mike Tyson, memes, and like what Tyson's pulling back his punches. I just think there is seemingly enough. Obviously, the damages I think are in the millions. Mike, to your point, is it in the class going to get certified? I'm not sure, but the damages are very high, and there's enough smoke around the lawsuit that I think you might be able to get into court and survive those early motions dismissed. That's just my sense. My sense. It could be wrong, but that's my sense. Okay.
Who would be sued? Most Valuable Promotions, Jake Paul individually, Mike Tyson individually?
Hypothetically, yes. I think you look at whatever they call it. Was it AT&T Stadium? Is that what it's called?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
But that's all in play. Like you would think the Texas Department of Licensing, whatever it's called, has a relationship with Jerry's World, and I think everyone was surprised. Like, why is this fight in Dallas? And those type of conversations, I think, are relevant. And we all go back to whether this was a properly sanctioned fight. So I don't know. And Mike K, I've obviously been sending you a lot of conspiracy theory people saying that Paul rigs every fight, and people bring up old clips of Jake Paul when he first started boxing. That he says boxing is rigged. They rig all the fights, and it's like, okay, it's not just one thing. There's like 10 things that should be investigated. So we will see what comes of it. Before we move on, a reminder: our podcast is sponsored by Themis Bar Review, top bar prep company in the entire galaxy. Spoke to a couple friends this week who have passed the bar because they use Themis, and now they're going through this process of writing these like acceptance packets. What do they call these guys? What are these, like your attorney admission packets? Taryn, you're giving me the thumbs up. What's it called? Your waiting admission packet?
What?
What's it called? What's the? Oh my God. Okay. Okay. Listen, for our young lawyers, our college kids out there, you pass the bar, and then the next day you're not a lawyer. You have to do letters of recommendation. You have to get your official transcripts. You got to get a lot of stuff. I don't know exactly where I was going with it.
We had to do that before.
The state bar application. You're doing that in.
Sometimes you do it after. Definitely I know you do it after because I just got asked by 100 people to do letters of recommendation. Okay. Any event, in order to get there, you need a great bar prep company, and you can use Themis Bar Review. Taryn, don't interrupt the read. Just go with it. Just go with the flow. It's fine. It's all good. Okay. I will stop talking because my kids are going to start screaming next door in a minute. Warner Brothers and TNT, big settlement. Taryn, you look so antsy to start talking about this case. Give us the lay of the land. Mike L, I know you have some thoughts. Mike K, I know you have some thoughts. And go ahead. I'll pass the baton.
Yeah, I think that this is something that we've covered a couple times here on the pod, just generally, that Warner Brothers was not happy that they were not going to be able to continue as a broadcast partner for the NBA with the new contract that was just signed. And obviously, it's a very big deal, right? The most visible consequence of this was going to be that Inside the NBA, which is a beloved TV show starring Charles Barkley, Ernie Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kenny Smith, that show would not continue anymore because they wouldn't have access to the NBA highlights and the broadcasts. For those that don't know, this show, which has been running for a couple decades now, it serves as the lead-in to big primetime NBA games on TNT, and they also do the halftime show and then the postgame show. Exactly. That was beautiful.
Keep that in the podcast. Do not delete that from the podcast.
Delete that.
You might end up getting striked. I don't know. That was so good.
But we've considered a couple different angles here. There was a discussion about Charles Barkley and whether they could basically sell the employment contracts so that they could go do the show elsewhere, or and kind of stemming from that, the guys all saying that they weren't willing to leave TNT, that they didn't want to leave the people that they worked with for many years. And so now we finally have a resolution. Warner Brothers had been considering filing suit against the NBA for not respecting contractual right of first refusal or something like that. And so here's the result. Essentially the show is going to continue, and TNT, through Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns it, is going to continue to produce the show. TNT Sports is going to have access to highlights, NBA highlights, for the next 11 years. And inside the NBA, the show is going to be shown on ESPN and ABC. And also, Warner Brothers Distribution is going to receive broadcast rights to Big 12 football and basketball games starting in 2025, something that they didn't have before. Mike K., what do you think here? Should Warner Brothers be happy with this deal? And should NBA fans be happy with this deal?
NBA fans, for sure. You're retaining a beloved, show that really, in a landscape of dying sports media almost, at least in the traditional television sense, you're retaining that. I think that's huge. And then, they're also retaining rights to broadcast in international markets, which I believe the NBA should really desperately begin to start exploring as they continue to talk about how viewership continues to decline and the struggles that they're continuing to have. So, yeah, I think in a Warner Brothers sense, they should be decently happy. I mean, they're getting $350 million in advertising support. They're still getting NBA highlights across all their digital, so their social media, like such as Bleacher Report and House Highlights, that'll still be running up numbers and still be doing fantastic under that. So I think Warner Brothers, they're still going to be in a position to continue growing, and we're, as fans and the NBA, going to be able to retain what has succeeded for so long, at least the biggest piece of what has succeeded for so long in NBA media. But I don't know. What do you think, Mike? I saw a little bit of a I don't know from you.
Yeah, Mike Lawson, who was tall enough to play in the NBA and chose the law over the ball.
not that tall. That's Brendan Duggan. So I don't know. This just kind of caught me by surprise. I sent this to Dan Lust when I first saw it, because it's like it's advertised as like a settlement, but when you really break it down, like this was this was major media companies trading sports media. Like it was like, you take our program and we take your program. Like that's just like a strange concept. Like it was effectively just a settlement, but it was a swap and trade of this content. I don't think anybody's going to notice, right? I think you're going to adapt and adjust. Like if you watched Inside the NBA and watched games on TNT, now it's just going to switch over to ESPN. And if you watched, the football games, college football games, Big 12, like you're just going to switch over to TNT. I think the difference is if you don't have some sort of TV package, right? Like I think those are two separate ones. Like I don't have cable, but like you can watch certain games, like certain college games on ESPN, like on the app or whatnot. I have the Disney Plus package or whatnot for streaming services. So like you can get access to ESPN. So I think it's just where you're going to watch it is a little different. I was extremely frustrated this year because that's how so many TV media rights deals always are. Like it'd be one random Friday night and I can't watch the Yankees because it's on Apple Plus. Like I don't have Apple Plus, so now I can't watch the game. Like I think there's a little bit of frustrations with all of these major media deals, but I don't know. It didn't seem like it's that crazy, but it's just weird that this is how it's like, it's a trade of content.
Yeah, Mike, I agree with you. There's obviously a lot of frustration there. I think you probably had to have like 4 or 5 different streaming options in order to watch 162 Yankee games last year, which is pretty crazy to me. I don't love that aspect of it. And obviously the companies here are going to be benefiting. But I do think that this is something that they did that is nice for the sport and for fans of the sport and for fans generally. Um, I don't necessarily watch a ton of NBA, but I really enjoy tuning into Inside the NBA generally. And the fact that that's going to continue, I think, is something that is good that these companies worked on making sure that there was going to be an avenue for that to continue, because that would have been a loss. Whatever you think of Inside the NBA, I think it would have been a loss to the general basketball community. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I'm not, I think the settlement is what it is. I will say, going back to our initial episode, initial coverage, everyone's like, why is Warner suing here? Like, they obviously blew the right of first refusal. They were given an option to match, all this fun stuff. I will say, more of a technical legal point. Sometimes I have clients, and I don't know, I'll say, like, listen, I don't think you have the best case. Sometimes you have a 25% chance of winning, a third. Sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes it's 80%, but it's never 0 and 100. Like, as lawyers, we have an ethical obligation not to take cases that are frivolous, right? Not to make a frivolous defense or not to make a frivolous action. Like, when we're talking about the Jake Paul stuff, like, I don't think the answer is 0. Do I think it's the strongest case in the world? No, but I don't think it's 0. Same thing here. Like, everyone was kind of questioning, like, well, Warner is just suing because they're sour grapes. And then you kind of look, now we're at the other end of this case. And it's like, okay, this is why they sued. Because they can throw this calculus that says, hey, we can make this thing really dirty. We can muddy the waters of your property. And you could just create additional leverage points on the other side. And maybe you don't have an attempt to, or a thought that you're going to litigate the case in its entirety. But if you throw a lawsuit into the equation, and people do the calculus of how much it's going to cost the lawyers and how much time and stress, and will people be talking about the lawsuit instead of the product, you just create an additional data point that will help you settle the case. So again, like, I'm not one of those lawyers that just says, like, sue, sue, sue. A lot of times I'll tell my clients, like, the lawsuit's not worth it. But when you're talking about this much money and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that involved with these property and changing hands, and the execs at Warner that might have lost their jobs if they didn't come up with some deal, like, I think it made sense to file the lawsuit to save face. And obviously, I think all parties are pretty happy with this deal. I think, we haven't talked about Chuck, who threatens to retire every year and said he was going to have his last season on, Inside the NBA if, like, TNT didn't have it. So, he seems happy. Everyone seems happy. But sometimes the lawyers can help. And I think this was a situation, obviously, that was really helped by the lawyers. Or else we could have had a world where Inside the NBA was just, like, gone. So I think cooler heads prevailed. And I think, Mike, to your point, like, we're not, like, when I'm watching basketball and I'm watching, like, Chuck and Kenny and Shaq, like, I don't really think of TNT. I just think of them. So I think if they're on ESPN, like, I don't think it's going to be that different. Okay. Everyone looks pretty good with that. Let us stay on the hardwood for topic number 3. Mike K., I saw this as we were doing our final prep for the episode. I think the whole saga between Jalen Brunson, Rick Brunson, Ragu, a.k.a. Dante DiVincenzo, and Cat, I think it's getting a lot of attention in New York. But now it has escalated to, when we say words like retaliation and harassment, I think of lawyers. I think people think of lawyers. I was going to say a joke in there, but we're not. But Mike, tell us the latest with what's going on with the Knicks on the hardwood in the Mecca at MSG.
Yeah, it's another battle between James Dolan and a professional league, and that's we mentioned the word harassment. That's coming from the Knicks side. That's what they're claiming. They've been under a microscope since Jalen Brunson really has gotten there. Not only in the positive sense, obviously, on the media side, but the NBA has really looked into them. They took a 2025 pick away from them previously for reaching out to Brunson and, after they concluded their tampering investigation. So they took away already a 2025 pick. This one, though, flying a little bit more under the radar until recently, was that Rick Brunson, who's the father of Jalen, and that, he was here right before Jalen got here, and that was really a big part of the, the tampering investigation and really the core of what this case is too. And that's that previously, it makes sense as to why Rick Brunson is here. I mean, he was previously a Knicks assistant during the early 2000s. He's been part of Thibodeau's staffs in the past. So when right before Jalen Brunson got here, he filled a lead assistant vacancy for that was left for Tom Thibodeau, right? So now, though, they are scrutinizing, the NBA is investigating and scrutinizing that whether Rick's promotion and then, of course, the associated financial benefits with that were actually part of a coordinated effort to funnel additional compensation to Jalen that he really had left off the table when he signed his initial extension with the Knicks. He signed a 4-year, $156 million extension this offseason, and he opted basically to not take a 5-year, $270 million contract, which everyone at the time thought was, insane. And it kind of is. You don't see that much across any league, never mind just the NBA. So, leaving that much money on the table and then your dad gets promoted, pretty significantly, I guess there's a lot of concern coming from the NBA. But the Knicks, of course, they're dismissing it, and that's where they bring in the harassment and retaliation, is that, they're emphasizing that Rick Brunson, that is his qualifications and prior experience and everything, it's all purely merit-based, and they're calling that the league's probe is harassment, that it stems from their resistance to actually certain league initiatives or policies, and that the Knicks front office, led by Leon Rose, the president, who, in my opinion, as a Knicks fan, has done an incredible job since stepping in. But they're all claiming, the Knicks are all claiming that their actions are above and within the rules. And another thing,
say something? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, go for it.
So anybody that follows the Knicks knows that organization. And again, you and I are Knicks fans. I think, Mike, are you a Knicks fan?
Sixers,
and Taryn is a Wizards guy. Yeah, Wizards stuff. But if anybody's following the Knicks very closely, they've they hired Leon Rose as their president. He's a former agent at CAA, and who's the agent for Jalen Brunson? Sam Rose, who is Leon Rose's son. So there's a lot of incestuousness. This is the word. Yeah, I was going to make up a word. It sounded more fun that way. But yeah, I mean, when you're mixing family, it's it's all throughout the Knicks organization. So I'm not quite sure. I don't think we covered it on the podcast. I think the Dante DiVincenzo, Rick Brunson blow up with one another. I think that was interesting. And he goes, Dante said something along the lines of we know who really runs the show here. So I don't know if there's anything illegal that's been conducted, but there's a lot of eyes on New York. And until the Knicks start winning, I don't love that there's all this drama around the organization, and they're floating around 500. So I can say the Wizards suck. The Wizards actually obviously suck, and the Sixers suck. So of the 3 teams that we support on this podcast, the Knicks are the best, but that's not saying much.
Well, one of those teams is trying to tank, and it's not the one with the big man that shows up late to everything.
That's fair.
Did you see currently, though, the Cat bet looks pretty fantastic. He's first in nearly everything in the Eastern Conference. So
the Cat bet looks fantastic. It's the greatest bet that anyone has ever made. You know what else? While Mike is here, Mike doesn't know I did this. My biggest future of the NBA season was Sixers. Mike, you ready for this? I said it on the podcast. Say it again. I got to champion my wins. Under 52.5. And I just get a notification today from our friend Shams, who took over for Woj, that now Paul George is hurt. This bet just keeps getting better and better. I wish I bet the alt line. I wish I bet under 41.5. That would be a win.
Paul keeps spraining his knee. I don't know what he's doing.
Listen, we got my NBA bets are looking pretty good this year, I'll just say. And Mike, to your point, if Jokic, Mike K, if Jokic, I think, is sitting at 13.5 rebounds. I don't know who else took this bet. I have a lot of friends that took my advice on the bet. The Cat is in 3rd place, averaging 12.5 rebounds a game. Sometimes we get him right, and sometimes we get him really right. 55-1 to lead the NBA in rebounds per game. He's right there. I think he's probably 2-1 now or 3-1. That's what we call a good bet, ladies and gentlemen.
Reminds me of the Caitlin Clark bet earlier in the year.
And how about the Jake Paul bet of the year? I'm running very hot. Very hot. That's who we are. We're very hot. Okay. I'm having too much fun. Okay. Let us move on. I see your faces. You're tired of my dad jokes. It's late. We all want to watch Thursday Night Football. Let us talk about the college sports landscape. We identified 3 stories. Mike L., I will let you take this in whatever direction you want. First, we have UCF, we have Bryce Underwood, and we have Temple basketball. Mike, whatever direction you want to go ahead.
All right, so we dive back into our NIL world, crossover with some sports betting. We'll start with Temple, I guess, and we can dip into Bryce Underwood as well, and then I can send it to Taryn. Taryn's got all the juice on UCF. But for Temple here, kind of dropped today. ESPN, Pete Thamel, always dropping some knowledge. Basically, the federal authorities have been investigating a former Temple basketball player who is now also former Virginia Tech basketball player because he had transferred to Virginia Tech after last season, Heiser Miller. They're investigating him for, it's not really clear whether he was either involved in some illicit bets or whether he was doing something along the lines of point shaving. I mean, the article says alleged point shaving, but it's not really clear on what they're investigating. Maybe all of it, maybe both, everything. Miller led last year Temple basketball in scoring. He scored almost 28 points a game. And the particular game in question, which was kind of alerted the sports books in U.S. Integrity in Vegas, was Temple versus UAB, where there was a 6-point swing on the spread in the early afternoon of the game. So they kind of threw up red flags, stopped betting on the game. And in that game, Miller put up, I think, 8 points on 3 of 8 shooting, just did not have a good night that night. So they're investigating him as it relates to this point shaving, where he didn't score a significant amount of points. And UAB ended up winning that game against Temple 100-72. So clearly hitting that line. So I think right now it's just kind of early stages of investigations. Miller is represented by Jason Bologna, and basically he gave a statement to ESPN that was very positive for Miller, basically saying that Miller has overcome a lot of adversity in his entire life, and he will meet and overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead. So very confident, statement from his attorney. Basically, the investigation will follow it, and we'll see where it goes, what they're looking into. Again, whether point shaving, as the article alludes to, or some sort of illicit betting and whatnot. Very interesting, and I'll kick it to one of you to see what you thought. Virginia Tech in October dismissed him for just on the basis of these investigations. So interesting. He never played a game for Virginia Tech. They dismissed him before he had an opportunity to. So don't really know what that means for the future of Miller, or who is going to, if he's going to have another opportunity to play, if Virginia Tech just didn't want to even deal with it, didn't want to connect or anything. But Taryn, I'll kick it to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this Mike Young at Virginia Tech is a good coach and did a great job at Wofford for many years. And 2 of the crown jewels of their incoming class from the portal were Jaden Schutt from Duke and Heiser Miller. And, they're without Miller. Schutt played last night, but they dropped a bye game to Jacksonville in Blacksburg, and that's pretty brutal. Not just for them, but for the ACC as a whole. So, there's collateral damage here. And obviously, kind of a statement that you would expect from Miller's attorney. He has to kind of put on the brave face. But that for this investigation to get to this point where U.S. integrity is involved, where the NCAA is involved, and where Virginia Tech was like, we're not even going to stand by him. He cut the cord. They cut the cord on him. I think that that kind of gives you the sense that there's a little bit more to it. That line moved that much, that his performance was poor in that game. Obviously, those things can be coincidences, but it is weird to see the line move by 6 points, and that's something that you just typically don't see, Dan.
Yes, I agree. Moving 6 points is odd, and I talked about it in my sports law class on Monday. It's like sometimes you just see line movements that are irregular, and there are sites out there, and I've mentioned the show. I know some of the guys at U.S. Integrity, and they have a matrix that compares, and they look at historical data from DraftKings and FanDuel, and they can see what looks to be odd line movement. Not like a little bit odd, but like giant 6 point movements odd. And like these things don't happen for by accident. And Taryn, you and I were joking last week about the Alabama baseball guy. Do you remember this with Neff? What was his name? Burt Neff.
Yeah, Brad Bohannon
and Burt Neff. Like some things are just odd. Like in that game, I remember U.S. Integrity. I believe it was U.S. Integrity, but it was flagged for a very high volume of bets on a weekday baseball game. Like
one
guy betting $150,000 at a window and saying, "I have inside information. Here's my text exchange with the coach." That should set off alarm bells. But a 6 point move on a Temple versus what was it, UAB? Like who's betting that? Like why does that have 6 points of action in a midweek game? So Taryn, you and I were alluding to it, and sometimes I hear things. I don't know if they're confirmed or if they're reports, but I was told, and I sense that you had the same sourcing, like or at least similar people. Like pay attention to the scene. Just be mindful of what might happen. And I'm still of the opinion that more news is to break. This is one school, one time.
Yes.
And I don't think these things happen in isolated occurrences. But all I was told was pay attention to the space, and that there might be many schools involved. That's I don't know. That's what I heard.
Dan, I know that you do a lot of work with colleges. I do also, but what are the ways in which the schools can be kind of proactive, right? Like this is obviously reactive. Virginia Tech cuts ties with them immediately. But is there anything that schools can do to kind of prevent this situation, alleged situation, the Jonte Porter kind of situation? How do you avoid this happening and these guys getting into trouble? Because, sometimes they can be easy marks.
I would tell people, there's a 30 for 30 called Playing with the Mob. It's from the BC basketball guys. There's a documentary on Netflix with Arizona State. I think it's called Bad Sport. But that there's a history of point shaping, and you're probably saying, there's probably someone that's going to get that advice. Like, yeah, but if I do it, no one will know. And like Jonte Porter, was a 12th man on an NBA bench who went in and pretended he had an eye injury and was shooting the under on his threes. So like, there are ways that it's very obvious, and there's certainly ways that it's less obvious. You could, you could know what your shooting attempts are and just not take shots that game. But in this day and age, with the tech that's out there, sometimes things will get flagged just for irregular activity. So that's the type of, if I was in charge of a school, and I would try to show these athletes, listen, we don't think you're going to do it, but just know that if you do it, you are likely to be caught. And here are all the parameters and tech that's being put in place. So, I always find this interesting. Like, remember, we did this once, and I did this for my class again on Monday. Do you guys remember how Calvin Ridley was caught betting when he was with the Falcons? Do you guys remember this?
Yeah.
Mike remembers. How was he caught? Just a pop quiz. How was Calvin Ridley caught?
His team, was it his teammates?
He registered an account in his own name.
With his name?
Registered on his own name, that's right. Yeah.
So, like, in Keyshawn Boutte, I think, did it with, like, the guy on the Patriots. I think he did it through a family member or something. But there's ways for you to do it through a friend of a friend of a friend that's far enough off. But, like, there are methods that are being put in place in tech that if a family member or someone, a relative or an associated person makes a suspicious bet, it can be put back to you. So I would bring these people in, like the U.S. Integrities of the world, and just show them, like, this is how fucking sophisticated it is. Maybe U.S. Integrity or those sites wouldn't want to do it because then they might not have as much business because people aren't betting and doing this. But I think for the
or they give away the secrets and somebody's able to work around
that's
their
fair.
algorithm.
That's totally fair. I think they're probably better off not doing that. But if we care about the integrity of the sport, I'm with you guys that we should probably try to have some preemptive methods, and maybe just a case study on how guys have been caught in the past, and just say like these guys are all doing different methods and they're all here, right? Jamison Williams can lead the class too, another guy that's gotten in trouble. Okay.
It's also just not worth it, right? Like, however much money you think you're going to make, you're losing the opportunity, especially like a Jonte Porter kind of situation. But even for a guy like Heisey or Miller, like he was almost certainly making some money from Virginia Tech, right? Their collective or whatever, however they got him out of the portal. And you're costing yourself any future opportunities too. So obviously we don't know for sure that Miller did this, but really hate to see kids get caught up in this because it can be a terrible situation when you're only 22 years old and it's over.
And we've talked about this like years ago when NIL was first starting out. We got into the Wild Wild West, and everybody talked about the fear of these bookies holding down these athletes in the back the hallways of the back of the locker rooms and things like that, and say, hey, prop bet stuff, miss a free throw here or there, it's not going to do you any, I'll slide you some bucks, right? That was the illicit activities that were like feared because of the old school point shaving scandals, like back in the day. But you're right, Taryn, like the what doesn't make sense is like how it really can't be that beneficial because the amount of NIL money that's around now that these athletes can make so much more money than whatever possible somebody's going to slide them. It just doesn't add up.
And just not on the college front. I mean, Jonte Porter, I think the minimum NBA salary is in the vicinity of $700,000, and
yeah,
he's now not going to ever play in the NBA again. And I think the reports are he got like a couple $100,000, so it's not worth it. It's definitely not. The risk reward is definitely not worth it. Okay, I think we are ready to close the books. 2 weeks ago, I went on this podcast and I told Mike K how old I felt because someone at work had never seen Old School. So I made a requirement of you. I directed you. It was a commandment. And I said, you have to watch Old School if you ever want to be seen on this podcast ever again. And Mike, last week, things happen. You said you had a conflict. I wasn't sure if I believed you. I know the truth. You didn't watch Old School, and I bought you an extra 7 days to watch Old School. So now we're here. Okay, Mike L just said the word. He just said Old School. Okay. And now we're here for your Old School review. Mike, how old are you? Remind the audience.
25.
Okay. I don't know. I'm really scared to ask how old were you when this came out. I think this came out in like 2003.
Yeah, I think I was 4.
Okay. Had you ever heard of this movie before?
No, but I'll preface it for everybody that I am not a movie person, or a TV person, so I am one of the worst people to to expect to know these things.
I'm looking at you very dubiously. You're not a movie person, not a TV person.
Never.
I guess you're just like a caveman person, but I guess
just sports. Just sports and music.
Mike, what do you watch sports on?
Well, I mean, I watch it on on TV, on my computer, on my phone.
The real thing here is that Mike is a masochist. He voluntarily watches the Jets every week.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay. Mike, this is the important thing, okay? I don't care if it's a good review or a bad review, but I think we have a lot of younger listeners in this podcast that have never seen a classic movie. Again, it's not the most PC movie in the world, but it's a movie that we are not allowed to make in this day and age. We're just not allowed to make them. They can't make movies like this. Every movie has to be tied to some franchise or some type of intellectual property, and that's just a really creative, original movie. Mike, what's your review on Old School? You like it? You hate it? Is there any good quotes that you like? Because there's a lot of classic lines in there.
Loved it. I will say, yeah. This is also the first recommendation that you gave me that I immediately, my girlfriend and I went and watched the next day.
Oh,
so,
likely story.
Yeah. So it was very good. We loved it. She loves Will Ferrell. I am not a Will Ferrell fan. I will say, and now that's maybe controversial that I'm a Will Ferrell hater. Maybe not. I won't go as far
An
to.
active hater?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say hate, but definitely not a huge fan. But love Vince Vaughn, so like was really excited to watch it, and was immediately started laughing that this is a recommendation on the Conduct Detrimental podcast, the Sports Law Intersection, because explicit explicit video or visuals immediately.
Did not say it was appropriate. Did not say it was
So funny. Just I thought it was hilarious. So yeah, if I had to, give it on a scale of, out of 10,
Well, no,
I
no, that's not. You just
okay.
I'm going to ask you how to score it. It's not, and didn't say it was appropriate, but I said, you could watch it in your own stuff. But like, we don't say inappropriate things here. People can watch it on their own. Mike, here is how we need you to grade this. Okay, it's one of two options. Okay, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
You're going to give it a boom or a doom.
I'm gonna have to give it 3 booms. Boom, boom, boom.
Excellent. Okay.
My boy Blue.
Earmuffs.
Yeah.
Earmuffs.
Well, you mentioned that it's the intersection of sports and law, which indicates that it's a street, and we're going streaking down it.
Ooh, bring your green hat. Bring your green hat, Snoop. Yeah, I think that we could probably do a sports law segment on that shyster Olympic scandal with Ari Gold, aka Jeremy Piven. What to watch for? Very quick. I just watched it, Mike. I know you're going to say this is blasphemous. I watched the Red Sox comeback series on Netflix. I thought it was very well done. I thought it was very well done.
15th one they've made.
This was really
Aaron Boone's favorite documentary.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. And my wife Rachel watched it, and that's always a good barometer. You can watch it with your spouse, your significant other who's not a sports fan. She really liked it, and she's like, wow, did the Red Sox win the World Series the next year? I'm like, Rachel, just get to the end here, but obviously. Mike, Taryn, anything to add before we put this episode in the book?
Yeah, I finally finished The Sopranos last night.
Wow.
Oh,
fantastic show.
I'm on season 5. Don't
All
say
right,
anything.
and I'm not going to say anything else, but it's just a great show. Really, really well made. My what to watch for is that UCF is bringing all of their NIL operations in-house, pending the House settlement getting approved in the spring. And so I think that that's really interesting, something that we're going to probably see more of, more GMs, more contract manager kind of roles. So if you're interested at all in this space, I think that there is a real place for people who are driven and capable of managing those types of agreements, those types of relationships. And we're going to see that all come in-house to athletic departments as soon as this year.
Taryn, good call covering UCF because we forgot to cover it. And Michael, just, this is why we keep 4 people here. Everyone's going to catch us. Can you give us your 30-second take on Bryce Underwood flipping his high school commitment to Michigan?
I mean, I guess this was going to be my what to watch for. Speaking of, you're my boy Blue. We've got somebody who flips to go blue here. This is crazy. I mean, LSU. This was going to be a huge thing for Kelly. Big deal. Number 1 overall prospect, Bryce Underwood, and then flips from LSU to Michigan, and Michigan is back on top again here. So this is a big deal. I mean, it's I don't know. It's a big loss for Kelly. It's a big loss for LSU, and Michigan has a great commit coming in now.
Michael, can I give you my prediction?
Yeah.
Bold prediction. I think that Underwood is in the portal in 18 months. I think the NCAA, for whatever power they have left, brings the hammer down on Michigan for their cheating. I think McElwain was the first domino to fall. The notice of allegations is out there. I don't think it's good. And I think they're going to get hammered no matter how many $10 million quarterbacks they buy.
I don't mind it. Okay, it is 8:20 here. I hear children still awake. That means I am called into action. I'm going to be like the closer coming in, Mariano, to play and Enter Sandman, and I got to come in and close the deal. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Mike, good old school review. Mike L. Taryn, great to have the NIL hour back in effect. And we'll give this podcast a big Boom. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time on another episode of the Sports Talk Podcast. Conduct detrimental.